There's certain things I absolutely love about the Audi Q6 e-tron and other things that have left me absolutely baffled. Now in this review, which will be covered in such a format, I'll be covering everything you need to know about this electric SUV so you can make your own informed purchasing decision. Now to kick things off, we have to talk about the different models, the trims and the price range, because it is actually a little bit baffling to say the least. First off, you've got the Audi Q6 e-tron, then you've got the Q6 e-tron Sportback, and then you've also got the SQ6. Now here, within the range, you have got the SQ6, which starts from a whopping £92,000, while the other models range from roughly £60,000 to roughly £77,000, and this is of course without adding any additional options, such as this red paint finish. Now when it comes to the trim range, you have got the Sport, the S-Line, and then the Edition 1. While in terms of the model range, you have got the Sport Performance, and then the Sport Quattro. And then of course you've got the SQ6, which remains in its own right a slightly different vehicle. Now nonetheless, we're going to see if this is actually worth its price tag, and of course how it compares with some of its key competitors. So let's kick things off and talk about its electric range. And here the entry-level sports powertrain is the only one out of the entire lineup that has a smaller, quote-unquote, 83 kilowatt-hour battery pack. That translates to 75.8 kilowatt-hour net. Now that gives it a range claim, at least according to the manufacturer and on the WLTP test cycle, of 290 to 330 miles. Now the other models have got a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack, and that translates to 94.9 kilowatt hour net, and these have got a range claim that goes between 340 to 393 miles, again on the WLTP test cycle. All the Q6 e-trons have also got a heat pump that comes included as standard, and therefore means it's a little bit more efficient to heat the cabin, especially on those winter climate days. Now the vehicle I am actually testing is the S-Line Quattro, and this has a range claim between 340 to 349 miles. However, for my own mixed driving test, which includes going on the motorway, going on the country roads and within the city, I only achieved 250 to 270 miles. Now that's not too bad in the grand scheme of things. However, given the overall price tag of the Q6 e-tron, one might have expected better results. Specifically here, if you look at the mileage leaderboards and you compare and contrast it with some of its key competitors, it actually is outperformed. In other words, over here the Q6 e-tron doesn't exactly stand out in comparison to some of its competitors, including its siblings. Now what I do like, however, that this is the first vehicle that I've come across from Audi, let alone the Volkswagen Group, that has a full one-pedal drive. See, right now I'm in B mode, which can be done by shifting a button on the center console, and if I were to lift off at 25 miles an hour, I'll come to a complete standstill, which I absolutely love. Now, of course, if you do not want to be driving in one pedal mode and therefore making it a little less cumbersome to drive in and around town, you can go on D mode, so therefore meaning that you can just simply coast. So for example, right now if I were to lift off the accelerator pedal, I am simply coasting at roughly 30 miles an hour. Now I can adjust the regenerative braking feel while I'm on the move on D mode using the paddle shifters, and right now if I were to just go up to roughly 30 miles an hour and then go on the paddle shifters and go on the left one, the vehicle will start decelerating. Again, if I don't want that, I can shift it off and the vehicle will continue rolling again. So it's good thinking by the manufacturer, and yes, finally we have got a full one pedal drive on a Volkswagen Group vehicle, and it's good to see that the Q6 e-tron really does have that feature. Now, of course, you do also have the ability of plugging it in. And here you have got electronically operated charging flaps, which in my opinion are a little bit cumbersome because they take a little bit too much time to open. You just simply want to open it and plug it in and not wait in the rain for it to electronically open very slowly. Nonetheless, over here, it's good to see that you have got a Type 2 port on both sides of the vehicle and a CCS port as well. Now the CCS port will take up to 270 kilowatts of input. That's thanks to the 800 volt technology that's present in the Q6 e-tron. And as a result means that you can go from 10 to 80% in a mere 21 minutes. Of course, if you were to find an appropriate DC rapid charger, for example, like the ones you find on the motorway. Now it is worth pointing out, however, that the entry-level sports powertrain has got a charging input that goes up to 225 kilowatts, although it has the same sort of charging time due to the smaller battery pack. As for connecting it up to a wall box, here all the models have got an 11 kilowatt onboard charger fitted as standard, therefore benefiting from 3-phase power supply, useful for example for those charge points that you find in the road, or of course if you have a modern house and you have access to 3-phase power supply. Using an 11 kilowatt wall box, it means that you can go from 0 to 100% in 10 hours, while the entry-level models sit at 8 hours to attain the same level of charge. If you're just going to be connecting up to a regular 7 kilowatt wall box, it will take a little bit longer, and if you're going to be connecting up to a regular 3-pin socket, then it'll take drastically longer. In other words, over 30 to 40 hours to attain 100% charge. So next up we get on to performance, and here there are quite a few different models to talk about. First off, the entry-level model has got 185 kilowatts of power, or 248 horsepower, and it moves up to 215 kilowatts of power, or 288 horsepower with launch control. You've got 450 newton meters of torque, and you've got a rear-wheel drive configuration that will go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 7.6 seconds, or 7 seconds with launch control. You've also got a top speed of 130 miles an hour. Now the performance model goes up to 225 kilowatts of power, or 302 horsepower, and that goes also to 239 kilowatts of power, or 321 horsepower with launch control, and that gives you 485 newton meters of torque with a rear-wheel drive configuration getting from 0 to 62 miles an hour in a claimed 6.7 seconds, or 6.6 seconds with launch control. Top speed is yet again 130 miles an hour. Now as for the Quattro models, you've got 285 kilowatts of power, or 382 horsepower, thanks to the 2 electric motors. The front one gives 275 newton meters of torque, while the rear one dispatches 580 newton meters of torque. You've got an all-wheel drive configuration that will get from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 5.9 seconds. Yet again, it's got a top speed of 130 miles an hour. Now as for the SQ6 model, you've got 360 kilowatts of power, 483 horsepower, and this actually moves up to 380 kilowatts of power, or 510 horsepower with launch control. Yet again, you have got the same sort of torque configuration with the 2 electric motors and an all-wheel drive configuration. This, however, dispatches a 0 to 62 mile an hour time of 4.4 seconds, or 4.3 seconds with launch control. Top speed does go up to 142 miles an hour. Now I actually had the Quattro model tested using RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 1.59 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 2.47 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 5.43 seconds, so therefore very close to the manufacturer's claim, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in just 2.51 seconds. Also recorded a peak acceleration of 0.56 G. So aside from its straight line performance, what about when it comes to its handling characteristics? Well, here I really do think that the Audi Q6 e-tron shines. It's got a good sort of one-to-one connection with the front axle. You even have that small sort of steering wheel that kind of entices you to drive faster and a little bit more aggressive. Not that I'm recommending to do that, of course. And you've got excellent traction, specifically in the Quattro model, with that all-wheel drive configuration doing an absolute work of art. Therefore, even in terms of wet tarmac, I had no issues whatsoever when it came to laying down the power. However, it's not all rosy. See, when it comes to the overall driving comfort, this is where I feel that the Q6 e-tron is severely let down. Now here, the normal Q6 e-tron and the Sportback models have got a comfort suspension, while the Edition 1 variants have got a sport suspension. However, all of them are operating on a 5-link setup, as far as I am aware. Now the combination means that this pretty chunky SUV really struggles to keep up with the potholes, the speed bumps, the anomalies, or the uneven terrain like, for example, you find on the country roads or even certain UK roads like some people will be aware of. You just constantly are seesawing about and it just doesn't feel that pleasurable. And this is really surprising to me because normally an Audi vehicle really absolutely excels when it comes to driving comfort, but unfortunately with the Q6 e-tron that is not the case. That is worth considering, however, that the SQ6, which starts from £92,000, has got adaptive air suspension. Now it does baffle me as to why that hasn't come down to the regular Q6 models or the Q6 Sportback models, because the adaptive air suspension would have really changed my opinion of this vehicle, especially when it comes to driving in and around town, and given the fact that some of its competitors offer a pretty decent suspension systems, this should have also come as standard. At the very least, Audi should have offered it as an option, but unfortunately it's not even there. So therefore means that if you do want the adaptive air suspension, which is absolutely a work of art and something I've come across in some of the other Audi vehicles such as the Q8, then you'll have to splash out a stupid amount of money. And therefore means that for all the other models, you're just going to be susceptible to rocking around constantly on the country roads, or indeed when you're pottering around town. I would also like to highlight over here that I am operating on the 20 20-inch alloys, and therefore that might have also hindered the overall experience. But still, the suspension system is one of the key factors when it comes to driving comfort, and alas, it's not quite there. Now, another thing to consider when it comes to the overall driving comfort is cabin noise, and here the Audi Q6 e-tron, at least on the 20-inch alloys, wasn't exactly the best. There's a little bit of road noise that can be heard when you're traversing at certain speeds, and I actually go into a bit more detail about this on my detailed audio review that can be found down in the description below or in the pinned comments, so make sure you check that out. Now, in terms of the overall interior design, I've got no complaints. Here, it really does look and feel the part, from the materials that have been chosen for the dashboard, the steering wheel, the door trims, or even in terms of the upholstery and stitching work. It all really does look and feel the part. Furthermore, I really do like the light beam that is at the front of the vehicle, which is somewhat what you'd find on some alternative EVs out there, including vehicles from the Volkswagen Group themselves, and they also serve a purpose, at least if you go for the sound and vision pack, because, for example, if you're indicating, it will show you that you're indicating directly via your dashboard. So it's a small little touch, but one that is certainly appreciated. There's also a good use of practicality with the use of haptic and physical controls that I found on the steering wheel, and a flurry of buttons that I found towards the center console. Unfortunately, however, the climate controls are all done directly via the infotainment system. And indeed, over here, there's a small little bar that resides at the bottom of the center display, and this allows you to adjust certain settings. And the buttons themselves are actually relatively large and also give you swipe functionalities. However, when it comes to the fan controls, you'll have to still access that via the climate menu, so that can be a little bit cumbersome. Now, as for the curved 14.5-inch OLED display, it's super responsive and also intuitively laid out. I also love the fact that you've got a small little shortcut menu that's found on the right-hand side, making it quite accessible. However, the use of OLED technology is questionable. As someone who's reviewed over 270 different PC monitors, and yes, OLED screens within that category, it does raise a few eyebrows, specifically when it comes to burn-in. For those people who are not aware, you have got image retention issues with any sort of OLED screen, be it on a PC monitor, a television, or of course, one that will be found on a vehicle. And here, for example, you have got that bottom climate control menu, which is pretty much permanently in, and therefore means that over time, for example, the course of 10 to 20 years of ownership, then you might actually find that completely etched into the display. But we'll have to see how that actually turns out with time, but in my opinion, I do think that is a little bit of an oversight. Furthermore, you've also got a glossy screen, which certainly does look nice. However, it's an absolute fingerprint magnet, so you'll have to have a microfiber cloth handy at any given point. Now, in terms of the use of technology here, it's fantastic to see that you have got Android Automotive OS that is baked in, which is the very first for an Audi vehicle, and as far as I'm aware, also the very first for a Volkswagen vehicle, at least that I've come across. And you've also got Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which are supported over a wired and wireless transmission, so therefore you'll be able to use your favorite apps. And it's absolutely great to see that the turn-based navigation does also feed through to the 11.9-inch OLED instrument cluster, which is also somewhat customizable and gives you all the right driving information that you'll require. Furthermore, you've got the head-up display, which is actually included as standard in some of the higher spec trims, for example, the SQ6 model, and also comprised within the sound and vision pack, which will set you back a whopping £3,195. Now, this is actually worth considering because the head-up display is one of the most advanced that I've ever come across, and that's coming from someone who's reviewed over 130 vehicles. Now, there is games that can be played on the head-up display, but more seriously, I do love the fact that there is a 3D integration and also augmented reality. It's not the first that I've seen of it, but it's one of the most advanced integrations that I've ever seen of it. Here you have got, for example, speed changes that look a little bit more dynamic. When you are deviating away from the center position of a lane, you'll have got the lane departure warning, which will give you a red line. Then you've even got red arrows to indicate that you're too close to the vehicle in front, for example, if you're tailgating them, or of course, in this respect, when it comes to safety for your braking distance. And you've even got arrows that are integrated, for example, when you've got your navigation system, and therefore gives you a little bit more indication of which exit you should take. There is also integration of turn-based navigation directly from Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So yes, indeed, the augmented reality head-up display is absolutely fantastic and certainly something that you might want to consider getting. Furthermore, the sound and vision pack also upgrades the 10-speaker Audi audio system that outputs only 180 watts of power. See here, it brings a 20-speaker Bang & Olufsen system that outputs a whopping 830 watts of power. Here you have got even headrest speakers and also a subwoofer in the boot. The combination means that the Bang & Olufsen system will certainly give you a much better audio experience across the sound frequency range. However, in comparison to some of the more expensive audio systems out there and in comparison to some of its key competitors, it's still not up there. In fact, if you want a detailed breakdown of the audio system itself, make sure you check out my detailed audio review that can be found up on your pop-up banner or by following the links in the description below or the pinned comments. Now, no matter which option you go for, the storage within the cabin remains the same. First off, you've got the glove box, which has actually been optimized for right-hand drive vehicles. Then towards the center console at the front, you've got a small non-slip area, which can be useful for placing loose change or, for example, your keys. And then further down, you have also got a wireless smartphone charger, which has actually been slightly angled, and a small little latch, which holds your smartphone in place. Further down, you've got two cup holders, which can be found underneath a retractable area. And then you've also got the center armrest storage, which is actually pretty sizable. And yet again, you've got some non-slip material, which has been placed over here. Furthermore, you'll find that the door bins have been lined in that non-slip material as well, meaning that you're not going to have that loose change or those keys that are going to be rattling about when you're traversing uneven terrain. The front two door bins are large enough to accommodate a 500ml bottle alongside some small to medium-sized valuables, while the rear two are unsurprisingly a little bit more limited. Now, at the rear portion of the center console, you'll find two USB Type-C ports, and you'll also find a pull-down armrest compartment which reveals two cup holders. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot capacity. And here you've got a pretty sizable 526 litres to play around with, or 1,529 litres if you drop down the seats. Sure, it's not exactly class-leading figures, but it should certainly suffice for your weekly shop for taking elongated and larger goods, and also even if you're going to be fitting a dog cage. Now, furthermore, it's also pretty practical. You've got a hatchback design that opens up pretty wide. You've got an electric tailgate that comes fitted as standard across the entire trim range. Then you've got a flat loading bay with 40-20-40 rear split folding seats. And there's also a release mechanism towards the boot, which makes it even easier to access on a day-to-day basis. And you've also got an underfloor compartment and a removable and retractable boot load cover. Now, what is absolutely shocking, however, is that if you do want the 64 litres of front capacity, in other words, the storage that is found underneath the bonnet, you have to splash out an additional £500. This is the very first that I've actually come across on any sort of EV, and I do find it absolutely ridiculous that Audi is charging an extra for it. It would have been great to see included as standard because it's actually pretty sizable, therefore allowing you to place your charging cables. Now, while that is disappointing, it is nice to see that you have got 75 kilograms of roof capacity, and in terms of its towing capacity, it's rated at 750 kilograms for unbraked trailers and a whopping 2,400 kilograms for brake trailers, far surpassing some of its key competitors, making it ideal if you're going to be towing something. So past storage, let's talk about seating comfort. And here at the front and rear of the cabin, the seats themselves are very accommodating and soft and had no issues whatsoever in this department. Furthermore, as someone who's just under 6 foot, I had no problems when it comes to headroom and legroom at the rear of the cabin. Indeed, over here, I could almost stretch out my legs while I was sat in the rear outer seats, while in the rear middle seats, it was unsurprisingly a little bit more limited. It is a shame here that the manufacturer has not provided you a completely flat footwell design, although it's nearly there, and also that the rear portion of the center console does stick out a little bit, therefore taking away for some key legroom. Nonetheless, over here, it is nice to see that the rear outer seats and the front two seats are heated as standard, and so is the steering wheel. What I don't like, however, is the fact that if you do want electronically operated seats, you'll have to go for the Edition 1, and this will indeed bring in a massage function. In this respect, it means that all the other models are fitted with manual controls only, and I do think that's somewhat primitive, specifically given the overall asking price of the Q6, which starts from £60,000. Electronically operated seats with a driver memory function should really come fitted as standard across the entire trim range, but alas, that's not the case. Now, as for the panoramic sunroof, it is electronically operated, and you've also got an electronically operated sunshade, which is very much appreciated. It does go all the way back as well, meaning that you can bring in some nice light within the cabin. Unfortunately, this is an additional extra at £1,525 on the regular models, or standard in the SQ6 variant. Now, this actually perfectly brings me onto its exterior design, and I'll be curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below. Subjectively, I really do love what Audi have achieved, but the same could be said about a lot of the rest of the Audi fleet, which actually really do look the part, because they're both aggressive and also have got the nice curves in the right places. At the front, you've got the headlights, which are pretty slender, and you've then got a nice sort of front grille and also a bumper design and a slightly flared bonnet. Towards the side, you haven't got body-coloured wheel arches or side skirts, but it really does actually match the overall design of the Q6 e-tron. And then you've got 19-inch alloys that come fitted as standard, or 20-inch alloys that can be optional, and they go up to 21-inch alloys as well. As for the rear of the vehicle, it looks pretty sporty thanks to an integrated spoiler, and also how the tail light extends the entire width of the vehicle. Truthfully, over here, I do think Audi have done a fantastic job. Now, it's worth pointing out over here that in the SQ6 you've got a new OLED technology for the lighting system. Not something that I've experienced myself, but apparently it gives road users an even better indication of what you're doing. Now, in terms of the colour finishes, a solid grey comes fitted as standard. If, however, you want one of the metallic colours instead, it'll set you back £725. And here you have got a blue finish, 2 more shades of grey, white and black. If, however, you want one of the Audi Sport metallic finishes, such as a Sky Blue or the pictured Sonera Red, you'll have to splash out £1,495. Now, the pictured red finish, in my opinion, is quite out there, but allows you to be seen on the road, which actually brings me on to safety. And here it was tested by Euro NCAP and awarded the full 5 out of 5 stars, scoring 91% in the adult occupancy tests, 92% in child occupancy, and 80% in the safety assist scores. Furthermore, it's great to see that you've got a whole bunch of driver assistance systems that come included as standard. Adaptive cruise control, which actually does work a treat by keeping you at a safe distance from the leading vehicle and not feeling jerky either. Lane departure warning, swerve assist, lane change assistant, front emergency brake, camera-based traffic sign recognition system, driver attention and fatigue monitor, intersection, turn and rear turn cross traffic alert, and also an exit warning system, while the SQ6 actually goes a step further by adding steering intervention. It would have been nice, however, to see a steering support on the motorway, for example, alongside adaptive cruise control, as it would have taken the stress away from those more mundane trips. And as that's not the case, at least not on the tested vehicle, and not that I could see it included on any of the options. Now, while all these systems are very much appreciated, it is worth pointing out that some of them can be quite cumbersome. For example, the camera-based traffic sign recognition system is actually quite a little bit off. For example, when I was on the motorway, it was often picking up that it was a 40 or 30 mile an hour zone, when in reality it was 70 miles an hour. Equally, on the country roads, when it's 60 miles an hour, it was picking up that it was going to be 20 to 30 miles an hour. And therefore, it was constantly binging and bonging at me, thinking I was doing over the speed limit. Now, thankfully, there's an easy means of disabling it. You can actually pre-configure one of the buttons that are found on the steering wheel to disable the speed limit warning, and there's a button that is found on the left-hand stalk which allows you to disable the likes of the lane departure warning. Furthermore, you can use shortcuts that can be configured via the infotainment system, allowing you to quickly disable some of these things, and that's something that I did every single time I powered on the vehicle because they became re-enabled. It does seem quite cumbersome for certain individuals coming from more older vehicles, but unfortunately this is very much the case with a lot of modern vehicles nowadays, including the Q6 e-tron, that you have to disable all these systems every single time you use it. Now, with that in mind, visibility in the Q6 e-tron is actually pretty good, although my wife did point out that you do sit pretty low down in the vehicle while the bonnet is a little bit raised, but thankfully you can raise the seats themselves, but I do appreciate her point. Furthermore, when it comes to visibility at the front and side, I've got no problems, while at the rear it can be a little bit more limited. Thankfully, you have got 360-degree cameras, park assist and sensors that come included as standard, therefore giving you good peace of mind when it comes to doing a complex parking manoeuvre. Speaking of which, over here you've got a 12.1 meter turning circle, therefore making the Q6 e-tron actually relatively easy to manoeuvre. So with all that in mind, it brings us onto our verdict of the Audi Q6 e-tron, and truth be told, it does actually tick quite a lot of boxes. It's both stylish inside and out, has got a good use of technology within the cabin with a decent set of driver assistance systems. It's also pretty spacious both at the front and rear of the cabin, and also has got a good sort of boot capacity, and you've got a good sense of connection with the front axle thanks to the way that the vehicle has been configured. However, there are a few talking points and things that you should consider before going out and buying the Q6 e-tron. And that is, of course, its electric range, which is a little bit lackluster considering its overall price tag and what else you can find out there on the market. And also the overall driving comfort, which to me is severely lacking. Something I never thought I would say about an Audi vehicle, but unfortunately over here we're talking about a vehicle that just feels a little bit stiff when you're pottering around town. Sure, it's great when you're going around winding country routes, but I suspect a lot of people buying this vehicle will just want to be pottering around town, and an adaptive air suspension would have been really greatly appreciated. Unfortunately, if you do want that, you'll have to go for the SQ6, which starts from £92,000, and here Audi should have at the very least offered it as an option to those people people looking at the regular Q6 or, for example, the Q6 Sportback. Now, nonetheless, if you do want some of my suggestions, do check out the description below, but I'd be curious to know what you make of the Q6 e-tron and how you feel it compares with some of its key competitors down in the comment section below. Now, if you have enjoyed this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. And as such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.